What is up, guys, and welcome back to the, I think, 5th now guide on the channel. Now, before we start, I would just like to quickly say, I'm sorry, I haven't got as many guides out as I've liked. I've had loads of other projects to do too, so I've been quite busy with them, but expect at least one a week now. And by the way, guys, we're actually pretty close to 300 subscribers already, so thank you so much, all of you guys, for that. Today we are going to be going over someone that was really highly requested, Makoa, and this will actually be the first frontline guide of the series. So I guess, guys, let's hop into it. Remember, I did have some help from Zemor since he's quite high level Makoa too. I've recently started playing a lot of Makoa too, and yeah, either way, let's get into it. By the way, guys, before the guide starts, I must say this gameplay hasn't got my best hooks in, but I wanted to get some good gameplay quickly, and I have pretty good stats, so I guess you guys will have to accept my terrible hooks this one. Okay, so first of all, we'll be starting with the ability overview. This is just going to be a brief overview of Makoa's abilities, when to use them, and how to maximise their impact. We've got Makoa's cannon, and unlike other frontlines, it's a decently bursty weapon. His cannon can shoot once every second, dealing 650 damage, meaning I guess you could say he has 650 DPS, and more often than not, this is enough to pack a hefty punch to support some flanks. However, it does come with the trade-off that it's nowhere near as strong against a large group bunch of enemies such as, you know, Fernando's Flame Lance. When playing Makoa, it's kind of important to get your target prioritization right. Focus on just one enemy. Normally a highly effective strategy is to bolt past the enemy front lines and attack their support or backline. This will really help you take down the rest of the team and generally just make the game easier for your, entire team. Each shot, depending on the damage dealt, will gain you 1 to 2.5% ultimate charge, which does mean Makoa has a relatively slowly charged ultimate. More on that, I guess, in the ultimate section, which does bring to light Makoa's aggressive damage fall off and projectile drop off for that matter. It's important to get some practice in when it comes to long range Makoa shots, since they can be kind of tricky, I guess. It has got a pretty big hitbox on the cannon though, so you should be good. Next up, we're going to be talking about arguably one of the strongest abilities in Paladins, and what makes Makoa so good. His hook. Now, this is going to be quite a big section since a lot of Makoa's skill is contained in this ability. Some general good hook tips are, when hooking, it's always important to keep the target prioritization mentioned earlier in mind. Although frontlines will be much more easy to hook, it's not always about the easy option. Try and look for hooks onto supports, flanks, or damages, since it will be much more punishing for the enemy and will allow your team to create much more space. When you hook a victim, do a turn to face your team, as you can see on screen. This will put the enemy more out of place and allow your team to more easily focus fire on them. Be careful not to do it too quickly, otherwise it can end up on confusing you more than them. Just be careful. The more range you can land a hook from, the better. It will displace the target more. Furthermore, you can try and hook enemies from highly contested high ground or areas, which can really just help your team wonders. For example, a Willow who's absolutely wrecking your team from the high ground, try and hook her down from there and it will really disturb them. You can sometimes jump and occasionally hook people through surfaces. I'm sure you guys have been ghost hooked before. This is of course a lot harder with the new hook hitbox, but it can still work. You can hook through Androxus's reversal and Terminus's siphon at the right angle, however you cannot hook straight through shield barriers. The hook is CC, so can be blocked by CC immunity. Time your hooks carefully with a Khan, for example, and just don't hook totemic rocks, just leave them alone, guys. The hook comes out of the left side of Makoa, as you can see in the footage behind. This is really important when you're trying to hit a hook when you're next to a wall. Even if you can see your target, it might still hit the wall. And on the other hand, if you stand with a wall to your right, you can hit targets behind the wall. The mechanics are more easily explained, as you can see in the background footage. Next up, we have Shell Shield, which is his Q. It's got a very lengthy cooldown at 60 seconds. Shell Shield is a spherical shield, similarly only to Barrack's ultimate and Barricade. The shield will penetrate through walls, making it very useful in holding chokes. It's also key to remember, you can shell spin with a shield and with your shield up, and as long as you're not running half shell, you can deactivate the shield by pressing the ability again. This means you can use the shield to block incoming heavy fire, such as a Drogo's fire spin, its salvo combo, and then put it back down. My best tip for using Shell Shield is to think about your allies as well as yourself. Try to use it to absorb as much damage as possible and move over allies to protect them. Next up we have Shell Spin. Shell Spin is a pretty useful ability, primarily of course just used for movement, but it can also be used to displace enemies with the knockback it applies. I have seen a load of people knock people off on something like Ascension Peak with this. Additionally, a favourite card of some heals them on successful Shell Spin collisions, meaning it can be seen as a way of self-healing. In general, I'd recommend using the ability to escape sticky situations or aggressively push on an enemy, knocking them up, about, and throwing off their aim, similarly to maybe how you'd use a Cassie Disengage. Finally, we have Ancient Rage. And, the question comes to us, do you challenge Makoa? Well, I'd hope not, because this ultimate is one of the most, if not the most powerful and influential ults in the game. As with everything Paladins, Hi-Rez absolutely hates melee for some reason, and I can see why, it's pretty hard to balance, but Koa's ultimate performs kind of like a short-range shotgun, hitting a very wide field in front of him. The ultimate buffs Makoa's health by 5,000 and allows him to achieve slightly higher DPS. It's nice to know that the ultimate counts as area damage, and for some reason Makoa holds 2 anchors and can still hook people when in ultimate form. I think the biggest thing to know about Makoa's ultimate is it should not be used just as a terminus ult. Many use it to just give them another life when on low health, while the rest of their teammates are dead. Here's why you should not do that. Firstly, the ult has an activation time of 0.3 seconds, meaning you might already be dead by the time you have your bonus health. I cannot count the amount of times I've seen, people go to save the point, free match. They go for the ult, but no, they die. It's a real pain, so make sure to use it not like that. Using the ultimate like this, more often than not, achieves nothing but a stagger, and if anything, if any more than 2 of your team have recently died. Do not try to stay alive until they come back with Ancient Rage. I would personally recommend using the ultimate to be extremely aggressive and push up on the enemy backline, pulling away the entire enemy team's attention and activating the ultimate at about half health. I personally like to beeline straight for the support and then move on to secondary targets. This can be very easy, especially if you activate the ultimate to exploit the enemies who are grouped up in tight spaces or corridors. There is virtually no counter to the ultimate when the Makoa is running Leviathan, except Drogo's. Try to take out a Drogo's or ask the team to try and target him before you use your Ancient Rage, otherwise it's just kind of nullified. Next up we have his talents, starting off with Pluck, which gives you 65% bonus damage on your first shot after hitting an enemy with Dredge Anchor. The old meta card. I personally believe that this card has little value unless the enemy team has no CC or CC immunity, and is also quite squishy. The talent also means you need to reliably hit hooks on all kinds of classes to obtain somewhat decent value. Half Shell. Shell Shield is now placed on the ground, is not channeled, and lasts 2 seconds longer. A bit of a story for this talent. Me and my good friend Zemel, who has actually helped a bit with this guide, used to believe Half Shell was just about the best card for Makoa. This was mainly due to our misconception that Leviathan only gave 1,200 extra health in Ancient Rage. You might be able to see why we were confused considering the wording, but hey. Half Shell is strong and allows Makoa to easily duel enemies, by using the shield similar to that of a barricade, weaving in and out to dodge the enemy attacks. However, the fact that you cannot put the shield down is really just crippling for it, not to mention the fact that sometimes being able to move your shield with your allies can allow you to save them from walking out or dying, etc. Unless you're really confident, I would honestly say Leviathan is just the safest card to go with. I really wouldn't pick Half Shell when you're solo frontlining either. Next up we've got Davy Jones' Locker. Who even knew it existed? If your victim dies within 4 seconds of being hit by Dredge Anchor, the cooldown is reset. I must admit, I've never really taken this card seriously, or used it seriously for that matter. It sounds decent, but in my view it's just a bit of a downgrade to Pluck, and requires the same hook accuracy, to even more of a degree in some cases, and team composition as the ones mentioned in Pluck to obtain any sort of value. Finally, we have Leviathan. Increase your maximum health by 1,200 and gain CC immunity during Ancient Rage. As I say, you might be able to see why I was a bit confused. As explained in the half shell section, Leviathan is the safest and arguably the strongest card you can go with. It allows you to be a bit more of a bruiser, as well as making an extremely strong ultimate even stronger. This can be expressly true when going up against a Khan, who otherwise can simply pick you up when you are raging at him. In general, a good legendary card is normally something that can always be of use. This is important to keep in mind with all champions. If it's a legendary card that benefits a really long cooldown ability, it's generally not going to be the best. Moving on, we have Makoa's loadouts. Now, for this section I'm going to my standard loadout and Zemmel's standard loadout. They do differ a bit, and I guess we'll explain why. My favourite loadout is the Bully loadout. This loadout, as mentioned later in the hints and tips section, allows you to play really aggressively, making loads of space for your team and zoning the enemies. There are some disadvantages and advantages for this deck, so check them out in hints and tips. It also has the CC version. As with all loadouts, you can import them all from my Paladins account, Creeves. Next up we have Zemmel's standard loadout. This is the loadout he uses when fighting teams with CC. Obviously there's a no CC version too. In contrast to my loadout, he feels this loadout is more effective in difficult games where it's harder to get a pick on the enemy and proc your extra speed from Rampage. Or when there's lots of spam and you're being forced to push the cart on the objective. Next up, we have itemization. These are just some general notes on what to purchase with credits. This section is to show you some good items to buy, and this is my guide, so obviously these are subjective. If you guys think anything's better, I'd love to know down in the comments section, just let me know. But genuinely, this is what I buy. Early game, I always like to pick up Court, unless they have no, support, and even then if they have like a buck or something, Court can still be a solid pick. Sometimes a frontline with Cauterize is really needed to sway the game, and I suggest at least if you're going to buy Cauterize to get it to level 2 or 3 in almost any situation. After Cauterize, it basically depends on these things: the map, healer, or enemy team. In the late game, depending on the points mentioned above, you want to pick up Rejuvenate if you need more healing. Pretty much any healer and you're a frontline, Rejuvenate will just really help. I love Rejuvenate a lot. I think it's actually really helpful, but especially if you have a Grover, Genos, Ying, or Pip. Master Riding is also a good pick on larger maps such as Timbermill and Ice Mines, where it takes a while to ride into the fight. Of course, choose Haven or Blast Shields depending on the enemy's team blast/direct spread. I'd normally buy Haven or Blast Shield second, then move on to the other two, but it honestly depends on the situation. As always, you can use the graph on the screen to show you what I think's, good or bad. You guys can have a little look. Next up we have hints and tips. These are just some nice little tips and special circumstances. Lots of the main tips I've already mentioned in the Dredge Anchor section, but there are some other important things to remember. Body blocking, on any frontline really, can be a highly effective strategy. It's really, really good to body block enemy frontlines after you've hit hooks on them, not allowing them to reposition back to their teammates. For me, body blocking is really what makes Makoa really good fun, and my playstyle with him always include the Bully card or Rampage. It allows you to go on really good rampages, killing the entirety of the enemy's backline and front lines for that matter. Not to mention it makes zoning enemies really easy after a team wipe. I really implore you to give it a try. In fact, it's effective, fun, and it's what makes Makoa really just interesting and viable in a more DPS-like playstyle. The issue with the loadout is it does need some momentum to get working properly, so it doesn't pair too well if your team is getting destroyed by the enemy. When fighting enemy shield frontlines, keep in mind that if you have the opportunity, you can hook enemy from behind and the sides, bringing the shield down. This displacement of the shield will allow your team to openly fire at them and often kill the people both behind them, protected from the shields, and the shield bearer themselves. Finally, we have the rank section. These are just going to be some general tips on Makoa and ranked, when he's banned, who he might counter, etc, etc. Makoa's an absolute top pick and ban and ranked. As of recent times, he's not been as banned as frequently as he was a couple of patches ago. I would generally say to ban him when you have the first pick, or I guess you could say first ban, to see if you can get one of them really powerful DPS, Furia or Khan without the worry of them getting Makoa. There's not really a time when you shouldn't pick Makoa up. He should be picked and banned pretty much every game, and for the most part, he really is. Not to mention, he is one of the most viable solo tanks and can work really well with a Genos or triple DPS team. However, it's mainly due to his Volk that he acquires from Leviathan. Thank you so much for watching this guide, guys. I've tried to kind of make it a little bit shorter since I thought maybe the Liang guide was a bit lengthy. Please, guys, I implore you to let me know how long you think a guide should be in the comments. I don't know, I'm thinking around the region of 10 to 15 minutes, since otherwise I feel like it might get a little bit too boring and drag on. But it's totally up to you guys. Let me know. I'll be happy to pretty much try and do any length. Either way, guys, remember any constructive criticism would be greatly appreciated. And also, remember to drop a sub. Let's try and get to that 300 sub mark. A new video out next week. Let me know who you'd like to see in there. Bye, guys!